Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are playing no selection, but instead we're going to be listening to this video right here by Winx. So guys, subscribe to Winx. He's my friend. Guys probably doesn't know who I am, but I'm going to listen to him. And I'm just going to follow what he says. First we need to find out what plane I'm using and what thingy bob I'm doing. I don't know what's called
airport for a second attempt to land.
Okay. So
the plane is
okay, so guys, the only thing we know right now is because it's the new PIA plane.
severely damaged and it has lost both its engines.
How's it 26
the
minutes,
undercarriage
man?
of the plane is visibly damaged. Oil is spilling out and low oil pressure warnings are blaring in the cockpit. The landing gear is not down. The first officer's panels aren't working and the plane is barely 2,000 feet off the ground. They still have 2 left turns to make before they can reach the safety of the runway.
Sir, we have lost engine.
But their plane is losing altitude and dropping to the ground by the second.
Yeah, this is why I
And
never
as the
go in
runway comes
PIA,
closer-
guys. Well, you're
How
so
did this
close to the
plane end
runway.
up in such a disastrous situation? And the question now is, will the 99 souls on board this plane make it
99.
home safe? This is a story that will change Pakistan aviation forever. This is the story of Pakistan Airlines 8303.
Okay.
Because you obviously love aviation
Dude, no one can.
and
Dude, I don't want the
19 pandemic.
sponsor.
And it's 30 days that this video is out.
Okay, you
so
guys, you
don't
have to
lose
watch
time.
this. Bit.
It's May 2020 and the world is in the grip of the COVID-19 pandemic and Pakistan is under strict lockdowns. At Lahore International Airport, Flight 8303 is preparing for departure.
Well, quite a minute.
This is a daily passenger service between Lahore and Karachi. But due to the pandemic,
Guys,
this is one of just a handful of flights in the sky today. Captain Sajjad Gul and First Officer Uzman Azam are in the cockpit. With them are 6 cabin crew and 89 passengers. Lahore ATC clears the plane for departure.
Boy, you didn't
The
tell me
plane
what
pushes
plane
back
it is.
and lifts
Or
from the
did they?
cockpit. Due to the pandemic, this is one of just a handful of flights in the sky today. Captain Sajjad Gul and First Officer Uzman
did that to
Azam are in the
A320.
cockpit. With them are 6 cabin crew and 89 passengers. Lahore ATC clears the plane for departure.
Yeah, that's
The plane pushes back and lifts off from Lahore International Airport
Please tell me.
10 minutes later. The plane being used today is a 16-year-old Airbus A320.
Thank you.
It was manufactured and
Okay, so let's go back to what I built. A320, and now we have to look. If there's no new PIA on it, I'm gonna be mad. Dude, I'm not. That's the old. That's the old one. Which is always. Look at it. Perfect. It's in perfect condition. Oh, here we go, the new one, guys. Yeah, that looks exactly like it, so confirm. Confirm selection. Send this one 4F. Okay, 5C then. Yeah, that's the smaller one.
delivered to PIA in 2004. Due to the pandemic, the plane was
Oh
grounded
my
for
god,
2
looks
months.
so
And it just
shiny.
started flying again.
Looks
a
so
week
shiny,
earlier.
dude.
Regular maintenance checks were still being carried out, and the plane was in a good condition. The plane was installed with 2 brand new CFM56 turbofan engines a year prior to this flight.
Okay, so I know what I should do right now. I should probably be getting to the runway. And a Q, and a W. Oh yeah, A, D, oh, I need all my lights on. M, N, K. K. Okay, nice. Now we have all our lights on, guys. Check if we need anything else. I think we're fine here. Okay, we're fine. We're fine to taxi to the runway, I guess. Yeah, you should never trust me in a plane, guys. Oh my, I had no idea that my flight time was 92 minutes. That's actually bad. Most pilots have like over 1,000 hours. I've only had 1 hour and 32 minutes of flight time. Very good for a noob like me. And on the high stages, some people have 0 flight time. Oh no. Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm on grass right now. I cracked my neck 2 times, guys. Have you heard it? I'll try to do it again. No, I wish. Fingers now. I haven't got my fingers. But I haven't never cracked my fingers. The only time I have is one ear and then I smash my fingers to something. Only time I crack my finger. My sister knows how to crack her fingers. And my sister has basically always cracked some fingers on me. On me, guys. No, break it, breaks! Breaks! Everything down! Now we're turning around, we're turning down, we're turning around. Go like 5%. Now just go down to the brake. Yes, we can turn. The plane has to be moving for it to turn, so... Dude, look! That dude just crashed! What did I just watch, guys? So I just watched the dude crash. Well, I can't say anything. Was this plane my actual crash? You guys saw the intro of the video, alright? So when you do it, guys, and I'll get back to the ridge. Oh my, but I can't go over how
Engines
good
were in
that plane
pristine
is.
condition. Today, the first officer is pilot flying and the captain is pilot monitoring.
I can't change anything.
These two people are going to play a major factor in the events today. So let's take a closer look at them. The captain is 58-year-old Sajid Gul. He joined PIA in 1996 and was promoted to captain in 2015. But he has had a controversial career. When he first applied to join PIA in 1996, he failed his mandatory psychiatric evaluation, which all pilots need to undergo. He was described as being bossy, dominant, overbearing, and having poor stress tolerance.
That's bad.
Now, normally a report like this would disqualify the pilot from joining the airline.
Was that not me in your
But Gul
mind?
was adamant, and he was determined
that's not
to
me in your
join
mind.
PIA.
Hey,
He went
Pierce,
and
do
sought
that.
second opinions from 5 other psychiatrists,
Huh?
3 from the
Okay, I'm
UK
going off
and 2 from Pakistan,
target, dude.
and they
I'm
all
going
declared him
off
to be fit
target.
to be a cadet pilot, and he was allowed to begin his training with the airline.
Subscribe.
Sitting to the
Oh,
captain's
subscribe.
right was First Officer Usman Azam.
I don't
He
have
was
this
33
one.
years old
Yes.
and with significantly less experience compared to the captain. Azam had joined the airline in 2010 and he had around 2,300 hours of flying experience.
Guys, like and subscribe right now if you want to see me do more of these.
Most of them on the A320. The first officer exhibited deficiencies during his career as well, and because of that, the airline withheld his promotion to first officer in 2016. But after undergoing correctional training, he was promoted. What this tells us is that the plane is being flown by 2 people with questionable training histories, and specifically by a captain who has been considered an underperformer.
Guys, it
There's
won't
also a
post
steep
video in
experience and
this.
age gap between the two, resulting in a significant power gradient.
Should I have taken off
This
right
too
now?
will become a factor in this flight.
Should I have been taken off?
It's the month of Ramadan,
Yes,
and the
I know.
pilots, both Muslims, are fasting.
No, I
They
didn't.
haven't eaten or drunk anything
But-
since sunrise, 8
I don't
hours
think you're
ago.
allowed. You should.
Although international regulations prohibit fasting and
You
flying
should, yeah.
because reduced sugar levels can affect your decision-making skills, since
Wait,
this
I
was
heard this, and apparently they banned it because of this flight.
a domestic flight within Pakistan,
Like they
international
had to
rules
not
weren't
pass during the
enforced,
flight.
and the pilots were free to fly. The plane continued its climb, and it's now
Oh, I better take off right now. Yeah, I should have been taken off right now. Sorry, guys. That's bad on my part. Oh my, these lights on. I need flaps off because that's how you do it. Guys, we have to wait till we go to 120 knots. Bam, take off. We're ready for takeoff. Okay, we're landing. We're really landing. Now take off. Oh, you guys heard my hand. That's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Greatest takeoff. But get with. Kevin, Kevin. Then, guys, if it says belly landing, what before? Yeah, it might be done.
Cruising at an altitude of 34,000 feet. The
34,000
skies are clear,
feet,
the weather is
34,000
calm,
feet.
and it's a perfect
34,000
day for
feet.
flying. They are about 150 nautical miles from the airport. The ATC clears them to approach the airport via this route. This route is called Nawab Shah 2 Alpha.
Okay, we're
To
actually
follow this
like
route, they need to fly at a heading of 205 degrees from the city of Nawab Shah and then take a right at around this point near the city of Hyderabad. Their goal is to hit the waypoint called Makli at an altitude of 8,000 feet. 4 nautical miles after Makli is another point called Saban, and they'll need to do a holding pattern here to reduce altitude from 8,000 feet to 3,000 feet. They don't know it yet, but their first problem has just started. The crew skipped their mandatory approach briefing. The first officer enabled the Nawab Shah 2 Alpha approach on the flight computer. Since the crew are busy talking about things unrelated to the flight, the captain doesn't cross-verify this change. Now, you might think that this is a major deviation to
I
standard.
should pause the video by now because I'm not even near there, you guys. And look at this. I play some music in the background. No, I'm going to get copyrighted. It's only been 1 minute. Dude. Dude, I think I'm almost there, so turn the video back on. Now let me just go a bit closer. Dude, go like 2 miles, maybe 2 nautical miles closer. I think that's enough. Now go back to the videos.
Operating procedure. And yes, it is. But hold on, we are just getting started.
What?
At about 2:15 p.m., the first officer calls up the ATC and requests permission to descend. Pakistani 303, descend flight level 100. Pilot discretion, proceed direct Makli. Focus on the words, proceed direct Makli. Because there's not many flights in the air, the ATC decides to give them a shortcut. Although they were originally cleared for this route, the ATC now permits them to skip Hyderabad and fly directly to Makli. The new route is called Nawab Shah 1 Charlie. They have also been cleared to descend to flight level 100. The first officer changes the altitude assignment in the autopilot. But once again, there's no cross-check of this change done by the captain. Cross-checks exist so that if one pilot makes a mistake, the other pilot can identify it and correct it before it becomes a significant problem. But this crew just didn't care to do it. And this behavior is going to take a dark turn. The pilots set up the autopilot to follow a managed descent. In this mode, the autopilot will calculate a path taking into consideration the total number of track miles left to fly, the speed at which the pilots want to fly, and any altitude restrictions that are present for any waypoints along the route. Usually in this mode, if everything is set up correctly, the plane should descend at a rate of around 2,000 feet per minute. This plane, though, is only descending at 1,000 feet per minute. A slower descent usually happens when the computer thinks that it's a long way to go to the airport. But given that they are less than 150 miles from the airport, the plane should have started a proper descent already. So why does this plane think that there's longer to fly when there's less than 150 nautical miles left? Let's take a closer look at the original route that the crew were asked to fly. Remember this holding pattern at Saban that's designed for them to descend from 8,000 feet to 3,000 feet? But with the ATC now providing a direct route, both the ATC and the pilots now intend to arrive at Makli at 3,000 feet without needing to do the holding pattern. The first officer clicks the direct button on the FMC and instructs the flight to fly straight to Makli. But unfortunately, he hasn't told the computer that the holding pattern should not be flown. So the plane thinks that there's around 30 nautical miles further to fly than what the pilots expect. After a while, the plane now hits the point where it thinks it needs to start the descent from. The engines are brought back to idle and the plane begins to descend at 2,400 feet per minute. Karachi ATC further clears them down to 5,000 feet. Once again, the first officer silently changes the altitude to 5,000 feet in the autopilot. There's no
How
cross
do
verification
you
or
try
verbal
that?
confirmation done by the crew. Usually,
Hello,
at this
Chelsea.
point in the flight, the plane is handed off from Karachi area control to Karachi
Help,
approach control.
help,
Out of
help.
habit and without clearance, one of the pilots changes the frequency on the radio box. And not only did they change the frequency without approval, they also entered the incorrect frequency. Instead of
They're
125
both on
decimal
iron or
5,
whatever.
the crew entered 126 decimal 5. This meant that the
Dude, I
ATC
want it to
wasn't
sense.
able to contact the plane at all. After about 5 wasted minutes, the ATC was able to contact the plane by calling them on the guard frequency. Karachi approach clears them to descend further to 3,000 feet. Since the
3,000?
plane started descending late, it's extremely high compared to where they should be for a straighten approach. The crew still isn't aware though. All they needed to do was to pay attention to the screens in front
Yeah,
of
that's
them
fine.
to see the U-turn indicator at 7.
Dude, that's
Also
better
the word
than
hold in the FMC. But since they were not following procedure, they completely missed this. The plane is now 5 minutes away from the Mackley waypoint, and it crosses Mackley at 9,300 feet. They should have been at 3,000 feet by now. They are too high to land safely. But all's not lost. As long as the pilots don't do anything and let the plane follow the
better
computed
be
path,
higher.
the plane will simply execute the holding pattern, reduce altitude to 3,000, and land safely. But their problems are about to compound.
Dude, I have to do better.
A minute later, with the runway in view, the first officer armed the approach mode to make the plane capture the glide slope. But in this mode, once the glide slope is captured, the computer will ignore all programmed
Guys, I'm just
navigations,
doing it
including the
with
hold at 7.
speedo.
And without this hold, the plane will continue to be too high when it
Speedy.
reaches the airport. Karachi ATC, who's monitoring the plane's
Ba,
path,
ba.
notices that they are more than twice the height they are supposed to be at and
Hurry
gets
up,
concerned.
babe.
He calls out to the plane, Pakistan 8303, confirm track mile comfortable for descent, to which the crew
This is
responds
what
with
happened, guys.
a firm.
They-
This
but
call
they didn't go
must
on
have
quite a
awakened the
promise.
captain, and he must have wondered why such a question was being asked. So he checks the screens in front of him.
Oh, I
Only
better
then does
be.
he
Oh,
realize
I
their
better
mistake,
go
that they
back.
haven't removed the holding pattern
That's
at
how I do
7.
it.
He becomes alarmed. What has happened? Stop, stop. Oh no. Take out the hold, take out the hold, take out the hold.
Dude, the hold
But
was the only thing
The hold was the
keeping
only
it
thing
like that,
was
dude.
going to get the plane down to the runway in time. Unfortunately,
Yes.
the first officer responds immediately and cancels the hold. He then asks the
Wow.
captain, hold taken out, should we report the issue? The captain says no. He overrules the first officer and instructs him to tell the ATC that everything is fine. The first officer agrees with the captain and relays it to Karachi ATC. Remember the steep power gradient that we initially discussed? That's now influencing the first officer's decisions here. The first officer, fully aware that they goofed up and can visibly see that they are too high, wants to take corrective action. He wants to bring the plane down further so that they can intercept the proper descent path. So he switches the plane from managed descent mode to open descent mode.
Guys,
In
I've
open
done the
descent,
belly landing
the plane will
2 times.
stop following the computed path and merely start descending at a predetermined speed until it hits
I
the
better
target
not
altitude
crash.
in the
I
FMU,
better not crash.
which in
I
this
better
case is
not crash.
3,000 feet.
What did I
To
just
further reduce the
say?
speed and to descend
Better
faster,
fly.
the first officer deploys the speed
No,
brakes
no, no,
to
no,
increase
no.
the drag on the plane.
I just-
The plane is now at 9,210 feet, just a mere 15 nautical miles from the runway threshold. To capture the 3-degree glide slope,
Guys,
they
go.
should have been at
I should
4,700
be
feet.
quicker.
They are almost twice as high as where they should be. The
And I
Karachi tower
have
controller
time because
has also now
you guys
noticed that
saw
the
me
plane
do
is too
that
high. It was at
landing
this
2
point
times.
that the plane flew over the Sabin waypoint as well. The
Oh,
ATC
God.
continued. You are at 7,510 miles from touchdown, trying to prompt them to realize that the approach isn't stable. But the crew responded with, no problem, sir. The crew is displaying a complete lack of situational awareness even after the trajectory has been challenged by the ATC multiple times. But why isn't it obvious to the captain that something's wrong? During later investigation, the past records of flights flown by the captain was looked at, and what they found was just crazy. In the past 12 months, there were numerous flights where the captain flew with high speed, high path, high rate of descent, and GPWS warnings, and no go-arounds were initiated, and several unstabilized approaches were continued. This captain clearly didn't care about rules and established procedures and
No,
has a
not this
history
time,
of
please.
unstabilized approaches. And for him, the current situation that this flight is in doesn't seem to be an issue at all. A minute later, at
No, 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 all the way,
7,400
all the
feet,
way.
The landing gears are brought down
This way's longer.
and the flaps are set to the flaps 1 position. The
It would
vertical
be
speed
correct.
increases from 2,300 feet per minute to an astonishing 7,500 feet per minute. This is a ridiculously extreme angle to be approaching the runway from. The approach controller, who is still worried, reminds them with, "Sir, orbit is available if you want," saying that they could make a 360-degree turn to
Okay,
lose
so
altitude
when we're up
and
in the
get
air,
back on the
put
normal
the gear
flight
in.
path. The
We can
captain,
put the gear
seeing
in
no issues
already.
with their approach, tells the
The
first
gears
officer
are-
to say no. The first officer responds with, "Negative,
Oh, you
sir.
can
We are
see the
comfortable. We
smoke
can make it. Inshallah."
coming off it,
The
dude.
plane continues to battle towards the ground. The plane crosses 4,500 feet,
Show
just
me
7
the-
miles away from the runway. Since the target altitude set in the autopilot
Dude,
is
go
3,000
back
feet,
in there.
the plane begins to reduce
Yeah.
its descent to level off at 3,000 feet. At almost the same time, the captain says he will be surprised what we have done, indicating that he was
What the
proud of what they have done
the
to bring the
biggest
plane to
turn in the
3,000
world.
feet without doing an orbit. But the approach controller
I
at this
just
point
didn't
is had
know.
enough. He gives them an order.
Right, I
Pakistan
did that thing
303,
3 times.
disregard, turn left heading 180. Sir, we are comfortable now, and we are at 3,500 for 3,000, established on the ILS
No!
25 left. Did you catch something? He says that he's established on the ILS. The glide slope requires a 3-degree slope to lock onto, but they are almost twice as high as where the 3-degree slope is. Then how is he claiming that they are established on the ILS? Is he lying? Here's where an unfortunate technical limitation begins to play a part.
Guys,
At this altitude, the
Guys.
3-degree glide slope and the
Guys, I
9-degree
have to
glide
be
slope
quicker.
both interfere,
because we're
causing
almost at
perturbations
at this
and
point, I'm just
creating a
gonna wait
phantom
at the
6-degree
runway
glide slope.
because I know
The
what
plane
happens
latched onto the
next.
6-degree glide slope and began following it down to the ground. And although the target altitude is set to 3,000 feet, because the glide slope is now captured, the plane disregards that setting and begins
Okay,
descending
what
down
is
to the runway.
working? The water is
And
working.
because of this
Repeat, the
extreme
water is
angle,
working.
the speed of the plane begins to increase as well. The approach controller gives them another direct order. Negative, turn left heading 180. Any other pilot would have turned left. But this one just responded with, "Sir, we are established on ILS 25 left," and completely disregarded that instruction. The plane is continuing an extremely high angle. The computer is commanding the plane to pitch further down to stay on the glide slope. It is now at a frightening 12.6 degrees. Because
I
of the
better be
steep
going
angle
fast.
and the high speed, several warnings start blaring in the cockpit. It echoes with "overspeed" and "don't sink" warnings. 30 seconds later, the plane's pitch further increased
Stall,
to 13.7
stall.
degrees. At this
Stall,
point, the
stall.
autopilot disengages as it is not
Stall,
programmed to fly
stall.
at such steep angles, and the first officer takes
Flights,
manual control.
flights.
But again, no
Yes,
communication
Tanda.
between the two pilots occur. Suddenly, a
Dude, this is
GPWS
a
pull
drifting
up warning comes
away.
on. When this warning comes on, the pilots are trained to immediately execute a terrain escape maneuver. Out of habit, the first officer pulls back on the side stick, reducing the descent rate from 7,400 feet per minute
Wait.
to 2,000 feet per minute. In an attempt
Don't
to stabilize the
replay,
approach and
please.
possibly to do an orbit, the first officer retracts the landing gear and the speed
Hey!
brakes.
I
But
wish I
no
could
verbal
hold-
communication was done between the pilots, and the captain isn't aware that the wheels are up. The first officer asks the captain whether they should do a 360-degree turn, and the captain overrules him by yelling, "No, leave it." The captain then immediately takes over control
he did.
by
Oh, he
pressing the
did.
side stick priority
did.
button and continue to fly the plane towards the runway. Just at the same time, the ATC clears the plane to land at runway 25 left. The captain, who's mentally prepared to land, moves the flaps to the flaps 2 position, increasing the drag and slowing the plane down. The plane now enters what's called the 1,000 feet stabilization gate.
Dude,
It's
I'm
the point
waiting.
at which the plane should be
I'm gonna wait.
absolutely stabilized in order to carry out a landing. But in this plane, the airspeed, the vertical speed, the pitch, and the glide slope
Only
were
two
all
things
out
are
of
good.
range. The plane was absolutely unstabilized and it should go around. But take a wild guess what they did. The plane is now at 750 feet in altitude, just 1.5 miles from the runway threshold. The plane tries to warn the crew that the landing gear is not down. A red ECAM message, "landing gear not down," is displayed on the screen. There's also a red arrow near the landing gear lever. As the plane kept going down, "too low, terrain, sink rate, pull up" warnings were all triggered. The landing gear is still up. The plane crossed the threshold at 200 knots. Because this plane was flying so fast, it completely overshot the touchdown zone. When the plane descended to 7 feet off the ground, the captain selected full reverse thrust. Even if the reversers are armed, it will only deploy once the wheels touch the ground. But since the landing gear has not been extended, the reverse thrust never engages. As the plane floats over the runway, the engine nacelles of both engines impact the ground. The entire plane starts vibrating. The engines begin to scrape along the runway. The friction of the engines with the ground causes sparks and fire to erupt. The sparks were so bright that it was visible from the terminal building.
L'Oreal Vitamin C routine.
Anna,
4 times brighter skin
how could you
together.
give me an ad? People are probably getting mad at me for staying there.
The captain tries to slow the plane down by applying maximum brake inputs, but since the wheels aren't on the ground, the brakes don't do anything. The plane continues to bounce on the runway up to 4 times, scraping and creating sparks every time. The captain continues to push the side stick down. The first officer, who's clearly realizing the major trouble that the plane is in, hesitantly pulls the stick back 2/3 of the way. When 2 different inputs are provided, the plane takes the average of the 2 inputs, and so the plane continues to go further into the ground. This causes the plane to lean towards the right, making the number 2 engine touch the ground for a prolonged period, scraping it and causing it to sustain significant damage. A fire erupts on engine number 2, and the fire warning lights up in the cockpit. Engine 2 fails. All electrical systems are switched over from engine 2 to engine 1. The first officer shouts, "Take off, sir! Take off, sir!" 2 seconds later, the captain advances the thrusters to the toga mode, and since the plane was already at 160 knots, the plane gets airborne again almost immediately. Engine 1 had to do all the heavy lifting to get the plane back in the air. The first officer informs ATC that they were going around, but the ATC had already seen the belly landing and a full-fledged emergency was underway in the airport. As the crew retracted the flaps, engine 2 went into an auto start mode and began to recover. Because of the prolonged scraping of the engines on the runway, a major hole had formed and engine oil was leaking out of it. As the plane crossed 1200 feet, low oil pressure warnings for both engines were triggered. The master caution warning also lit up, putting immense pressure on the 2 pilots. In order to focus, the crew cancelled the warnings and continued to 3000 feet. ATC then instructs them to turn left to 110 degrees and to level off at 3000 feet. At about the same time, due to the severe impact it had undergone, engine 1 fails. Remember, engine 1 was the only engine powering all the electrical equipment on the plane. All they have left is the APU and the ram turbine for electrical power. But thankfully, engine 2, which was attempting to restart, successfully begins to turn on. But sadly, the first officer notices the earlier fire warning for engine 2 and moves the thrust lever for engine 2 back to idle to try to protect it. The engine that had just turned on is now back in idle. The plane continues to fly downwind, losing altitude and losing speed. It is now at 1900 feet. The captain, clearly disoriented, asks the first officer where the runway was. The first officer points to the runway out of the captain's left window. ATC, seeing the plane lose altitude, calls out. The crew then requests a clearance to remain at 2000 feet, which is cleared. The plane keeps descending further. ATC wants them again, and the first officer responds. The first officer reminds the captain to maintain a minimum speed of 140 knots, as the ram air turbine will stop working at any speed under that. If they lose a ram turbine, they will lose all electrical systems. The captain, who at this point notices that the engine 2 thrust lever is in idle, says to the first officer, "You have selected engine 2 to idle. Engine 1 is gone." The first officer responds with, "Yeah." Almost at the same time, engine 2 also shuts down due to the previous damage. They are now flying with no engines and with just the ram turbine. The first officer pleads with the captain, "Increase the speed." The captain, obviously flustered, responds with, "How will I increase my speed?" ATC says, "Looks like you're turning left." The first officer responds, "We are proceeding direct, sir. We have lost both engines." The controller then asks the crew to confirm whether they'll be attempting a belly landing. The first officer responds with, "Negative, sir." The captain instructs the first officer to bring the landing gear down. The first officer complies and brings the lever down. This was the last nail in their coffin. With no engines on the plane, this plane is just a glider. They are already very close to the ground with a slim chance of making it back to the runway. But By extending the landing gear, they substantially increased the drag on the plane and reduced the distance that the plane could fly.
The landing
The
gear is
first officer
pushing
calls
now.
out, "Mayday, mayday, mayday," as the plane descends to 700 feet.
The landing
Soon
gear is
after this,
pushing
a
it
stall,
down.
stall warning is heard in the cockpit. The plane turns left towards the runway. The Karachi controller informs them that all runways are available. The situation in the cockpit was tense and confusing, with all sorts of warnings going off simultaneously. As the plane descends through 400 feet, the captain calls out, "Don't take flaps, don't take flaps," obviously trying to avoid any extra drag on the airplane. But with the gear hanging out, they had already sealed their fate.
Yeah.
The plane crashed into a densely populated residential area called Model Colony, about 1300 meters short of runway 25 left. The plane immediately broke up and an intense fire erupted. It also engulfed several buildings
But
around
how
the
did
crash
they
site.
show like a real one?
Only 2 people survived this crash, and another person on the ground was also fatally injured. Emergency services were immediately dispatched to the site, but they were impeded by narrow streets and the crowd of locals who were trying to help them. The final report found the cause of the crash to be non-adherence of regulations by the crew. They also found that the pilot's fasting could have been a secondary contributor, as they may have had reduced spatial awareness. The flying while fasting rule has since been fixed by Pakistan International Airlines. During the investigation, it was also found that a shocking 40% of all pilots flying in Pakistan were flying with fake pilot licenses.
Fake
This
pilot.
revelation caused Pakistan International Airlines to be blacklisted by both the EU and the United States. Once again, thanks to my sponsor, Conflict of Nations.
So that's the end of the video. You've learned something today. This is the end of it. So peace.